A Duke professor claims he was suspended over racist comments left online. Now, according to WTVD, Duke University Professor Jerry Hough responded to a New York Times article titled "How Racism Doomed Baltimore." Well, what did he say? Well, he says this: the blacks get symbolized already. When you start out a sentence with "the blacks,"
Yeah, I was gonna say there you
that's a
go.
red flag already.
Yeah,
They get symbolic recognition in an utterly incompetent mayor who handled this so badly from beginning to end that her resignation would be demanded if she were white. The blacks get awful editorials like this, which he was responding to, that tell them to feel sorry for themselves. Oh, they're just being the victim. They're just playing victim. Of course, like there isn't such a thing as, I don't know, institutional racism in a country. No, not at all. In fact, he goes to the topic of discrimination and he uses Asian people as an example.
Oh, he referred to them as the Asians, Jeff.
Yes, the
There
Asians.
are the blacks and the Asians. This
Okay.
guy, apparently, race in the United States, this guy are just a couple meetup groups of which he's not a member of. But continue.
Well, he noted that the Asians faced discrimination throughout U.S. history, which is factually correct. And there was a time in America where we decided we're going to shut out people from China. We're going to shut out the Chinamen because there are too many coming over. So we've had a systemic reaction against different racial groups coming into America, and not just racial groups, but different groups. I mean, we discriminated against the Irish as well.
Yeah, well, and Italians too.
Yeah, so we've had
Yeah, I mean, you
a
can.
long history of discriminating against different groups. Well, he points out the Asians had also suffered discrimination, but he says of them, quote, they didn't feel sorry for themselves, but worked doubly hard. As far as the African Americans, it gets worse.
Yeah, keep reading here because this last part's pretty important too.
Now, he says, I'm a professor at Duke University. Every Asian student has a very simple old American first name that symbolizes their desire for integration. Virtually every black has a strange new name that symbolizes their lack of desire for integration. He also adds that black people made the problem worse by refusing to date white people. Oh, jeez.
How is this guy at Duke University? I mean, Duke University is a pretty conservative university, but it's also a very high caliber institution. And it blows my mind. A person that uses this type of verbiage in
Oh, yeah.
2015 and has these types of just small, hateful, racist, backwards ideas would be at an institution like that. I mean, that's insane.
It really is.
I mean, on it, like, I mean, his argument here is so intellectually small and just I mean what he's generalizing I guess if you don't name your kid Steve it means you don't want to be integrated in a country that's absolutely insane and ridiculous. I mean I grew up in an Italian community, a largely Italian American community. It wasn't uncommon for people to have names like Giuseppe. It wasn't uncommon. I had a friend named Nunzio. It wasn't that. So you're saying that they don't want to be. That's just acknowledging a cultural heritage that has nothing to do with where you presently live. And quite frankly, we are a melting pot nation, so, I mean, just saying something like that is so ignorant. And clearly it's racist because he's just
Yep.
directing this at black people, not anyone else. Whereas all kinds of different ethnic groups do that kind of thing. That they have their names that are linked to their roots and their traditions. And I think that's a healthy thing. I think it'd be a very boring country if everyone was named Michael or Sue,
Right.
I mean, what that's just tipping the iceberg at how dumb this guy's statements are. That was just one sentence that I looked into. There's a
And
lot more.
there's plenty more. He says it was appropriate that a Chinese design won the competition for the Martin Luther King state. King helped them overcome. The blacks, however, well, they followed Malcolm X.
Wow.
Fascinating.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think all you need to do is turn to a couple books and show this guy a couple pictures of marches to grossly disprove what he just said.
Well, okay, so this guy, however, this guy claims he's not racist. I'm, of course,
Yes, he
strongly...
does.
No, I'm, of course, strongly against the toleration of racial discrimination. I do not know what racial intolerance means in modern code words, and hesitate to comment on that specific comment he wrote to the station in an email. In writing me, no one has said I was wrong, just racist. Well, see? I'm not wrong. There's people just say I'm racist, but they didn't point out how I'm wrong, so I must be right.
Wow. Well, no, I mean, well, I can tell him how he's wrong. Let's see. Where do we want to begin?
Where do you want to start?
First of all, this guy demonstrates. I mean, what's he a professor in? It said somewhere. I'm looking at it on my phone. That's why I'm like, where does it say what he's a professor in? Either way, I hope it's not history, because clearly this guy has demonstrated no understanding of Malcolm X, or no understanding of the civil rights movement, and a grossly small understanding of the history of immigration in this country. And wow, I mean, this is just wow.
It's incredible. And even Duke University, as you said, they're a conservative institution. Even they're like, oh my goodness, oh, why did you say that? Why? Duke Vice President for Public Affairs and Government Affairs, Michael Schoenfield, says that Hugh's comments were noxious, offensive, and have no place in civil discourse.
Which is a great description. Mm-hmm. And, just to clarify here, when I say a conservative, I don't mean like, oh yeah, it's a really like it's a far right university. It's just, when you think about universities that are a little more left leaning, you don't think of Duke. That's a little more of a center right place. But of course, statements like this at any institution of higher learning would not and should not be tolerated. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he has an issue with that because he thinks it should be tolerated, because he thinks people are just too darn sensitive. Those blacks are just too darn sensitive. Quote, I'm strongly against the obsession with sensitivity. The more we have emphasized sensitivity in recent years, the worse race relations have become. In my opinion, the time has come to stop talking incessantly about race relations in general terms, as the president and activists have advocated, but talk about how the Asians and Poles got ahead, and to copy their approach. I don't see why that is insensitive or racist.
I love this sentence, though. Let's stop talking in general terms and start talking about the Asians and the Poles. Did I mention I'm going to talk about the blacks as well? We need to stop generalizing, by the way, but why do the blacks have goofy names? What planet is this guy on?
I don't know, man. So... Anyway.
Clearly, I hope another class I hope this guy doesn't teach, argumentation. Because this dude has the lingual skills of a 5-year-old. Let's stop generalizing. The blacks have goofy names.
Yeah, let's stop generalize and generalize these three different groups of people, because he lumped in the Asians and the Poles. And the blacks. So, let's generalize about these three, but let's stop generalizing about this discussion. Okay, man, sure.
And you know what? I'm not trying to incite anything here or imply anything here, but looking at this guy's picture, this guy, if somebody just showed me a picture of this dude walking around or whatever, he does kind of look like somebody who might put a hood on their head on the weekends. Just saying. He does kind of have that appearance. And if I read these comments and somebody was like, who do you think wrote that? I would say like somebody that was either affiliated with a straight up hate group, somebody that needs to be educated a little more. I would certainly never in a million years say an educator. I mean the fact that these statements came from this person is just scary and sad.
So here's the question for you. Here's the $1 million question. do you think he should get fired from his position for saying these comments on a... Remember, this wasn't him in his class saying all this stuff. He was writing in a comment section on the New York Times, and then somebody found it and said, "Holy crap, that's this guy." The college found it and said, "We're gonna put him on suspension. Might even possibly fire him." Do you think that's the right course to go?
Yeah, I do. Because, and I get it, we have a First Amendment, we have freedom of speech, and certainly, you are free to make comments on articles and on websites. And for the most part, I do not think you should be penalized for it just for expressing a point of view, even if that point of view is not in alignment with my own. I have some colleagues in my graduate program. They love Ayn Rand. They are brilliant in a lot of ways, but on certain things, we do not see eye to eye.
Sure.
If they were ever fired for that, even though I disagree with them a lot in that regard, I would take offense to that. And I would say they are great educators, and just because politically we don't agree on everything, I hate to see that, that's wrong. But this guy, why this is different, this guy has demonstrated, first of all, a lot of racial hatred. He's demonstrated a complete disconnect from anything resembling what's going on in higher education, what's going on in the status quo. The fact that he entertains these bogus, disconnected ideas, I would say, is indication that he does not belong in a classroom with youth, especially with diverse youth. There's a lot of Asians at Duke University. There's a lot of black people at Duke University. I wouldn't feel comfortable taking this guy's class, reading that stuff. I don't see how anyone else would. And this guy entertains some ideas that I think, you shouldn't have that type of position in higher education if that's the type of narrative you entertain. You have a right to say it. You have a right to entertain that narrative, but you have to deal with the consequences associated with it. Similarly, if you want to be a cop and you're a member of the KKK, you shouldn't be able to be a cop, because the job of a cop is to serve and protect. If you think that all people aren't worth serving and protecting, you don't need to have that job. You have the freedom of speech to join your hateful group, but you have to deal with the consequences. Same situation here. So I think the university could and should fire him.
All right, that sounds fair enough. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to have me disagree with that on that assessment. So
right, it's not like this guy just said something conservative or liberal, or said something dissenting from popular opinion. This guy said some hateful, xenophobic stuff, some overtly nationalistic, hateful stuff that sounds like something you'd read on like a white power website or something like that. I mean, that is how this stuff looks. Because, they also use the blacks, the Asians, this and that. And when you show that type of disconnect, clearly you have no regard for the idea of higher education, which is to, educate a populace. And so...
Well, not only that, but based on what he was saying, do you think he would be fair towards people who are African-American students? If you consider them all lazy and, with weird names and everything, how are you going to approach that? Are you going to be inherently fair or unfair if you have preconceptions? And maybe that's an unfair question to ask, but I think, in my opinion, that is a fair question.
No, I think it's a fair question too, man. I can't argue with that. I think that's a very fair question to ask.
Exactly. And so that's why I would lean more towards you're allowed to be a hateful person, but you're not allowed to escape certain consequences, especially when it comes to the being judged in the court of public opinion.
Yeah, well, and you know what? There's certain standards that I think an institution at the level of Duke needs to uphold. And I think this guy completely goes against those standards in every sense. And I think there are a lot of hungry academics out there that would probably do a better job than this guy. So I say get rid of him. And maybe this is coming from somebody who still has a foot in the academy to some degree, still sees some of the problems within it as well as some of the good things within it. I think people like this are a stifling thing and should not have those positions.